Hello.
Hi, teacher. How are you?
I'm okay. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Very good. Very good. I think we spoke a couple weeks ago, right?
Yeah, and it's nice to meet you again.
Yes. Nice to see you again. Sorry, I'm actually a little sick, so if I'm not super animated, I'm just a little under the weather, but I'm good.
Okay, no problem. Today, I want to talk about learning languages in general. I prepared some question about this topic, and maybe next class I will start taking lessons. Okay.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. So I will start by this question. What
Mhm.
tips can you give for learning to speak another language or English?
Sure. I think we're all a little different, so we all kind of find things that work better for us. But I think that what works for most of us is something we enjoy. So some people really like watching like shows in another language. Some people really like having conversations. Um, if there's something you can do that you enjoy anyway, and then you just do it in English, so listening to your podcasts or, again, watching your shows, listening to music, I think that that's pretty helpful. I think also it's important to like always try to be using the language.
Okay.
If you practice for a little bit in the morning and then you don't practice until next practice time, you're going to get good at recalling or remembering during those sessions.
Yeah.
But if you really want to get natural and you want to make yourself kind of start to think in that language, um, try to always have things in that language be coming in.
Yeah, and in addition to this, maybe we shouldn't be afraid of making mistakes. I think by practicing, we can avoid these mistakes. We shouldn't give up because maybe we do a lot of mistakes. We just need to continue and practice and practice.
Yeah, I mean, mistakes are part of the process. If you had two students, right, and one made a lot of mistakes and one made no mistakes, I can guarantee you the one who's making more mistakes is learning more.
Yeah. Uh,
When you make a mistake and you fix it, you remember that and your brain doesn't want to make that mistake again. So making mistakes while uncomfortable just is part of the process.
Yeah. In fact, my aim is to master English by the end of 2023 because I think learning another language gives us many benefits. For example, we needed to continue to communicate with the people from other countries, and when we're traveling, we can read and notices so we don't get lost. And in addition to this, we need it for technology. And also, some scientists believe learning another language is good for our mental health and it protects us against Alzheimer. I don't know if
Yeah.
this real, but maybe I think learning English is very important these days.
Just learning in general is good for your brain. It's a healthy thing. And, I don't know how much has been researched with specifically language learning and specifically towards, Alzheimer's, but, I do know just my personal experience with, grandparents getting older, those who kept active, read every day and were curious and, learned, um, tended to have, kind of better mental health in the end of their lives too. It makes
Yeah.
sense to me.
So learning in general is good for us.
Yeah, absolutely. The brain isn't a muscle, but we can still make an analogy to it being like a muscle. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So just like if you laid in bed every day, eventually you wouldn't be able to walk. Well, it's the same with your brain. I mean, if you stopped using it, right, eventually it would deteriorate. And just like with a muscle, you exercise it to make it stronger with your brain. If you exercise your brain, And I think learning a language is a very good way to exercise your brain.
yeah,
It will become stronger.
yeah. So that means maybe learning like sports. Sports we're doing it to make our body stronger, and learning reading is good for make our mind or brain is stronger also.
Yeah, exactly.
As you know, English language has thousands and thousands of words. So, how many words do I have to learn to be fluent in speaking English?
You
It's
know,
a
I
strange, maybe it's a strange question, but most
you know it's
students ask this question.
I don't think it's that strange of a question. It's something that gets talked about every now and then. But the thing is, there's so much of a language that's more than just vocabulary. There's the grammar, there's phrases, there's idioms, and also just because you know it, some people are good at taking tests, right? They could write down 4,000 words, but they couldn't say any of them in a conversation, whereas someone else maybe could only write down 1,000, but they could say every single one. So I don't think it's an easy question to answer,
Yeah.
but I think it's a useful measure. I would say that once you start getting to where you can comfortably speak 2 or 3 thousand words, um, you know, you're you're well into that beginner place, right? But you're still a beginner. You're not fluent yet. Most native speakers are going to have 10, 12, 15,000 words in their vocabulary, but you could probably have half as many as a native speaker and be considered fluent. A lot of that giant vocabulary comes from, like, well, during, let's say, those first 20 years of your life, 10 of them were pretty solid language learning, but the other 10, you still just picked up so much. You pick up a lot of slang and subtleties and nuances, and you don't need to have all of that to be fluent. So I would say if you know 5,000 words, you're probably fluent. But again, it depends.
Yeah.
There's going to be someone who knows 5,000 words and is not fluent. And there's going to be someone else who maybe only knows four, but they are, just because their skills are in different areas.
Yeah, maybe I'm an intermediate student. Maybe at this stage I should focus on the high frequency words, the most repeated words, and leave the lower frequency words because it's hard to memorize all of them because we don't use them a lot. It's better maybe for me to focus on the high frequency words. I don't know if this correct or not, but I'm trying to
Well, I
do
mean,
this.
like I said earlier, like we all kind of take to certain things better than others. I have some students that, like, every night before they go to bed, they learn 5 new words. And then when they wake up in the morning, they practice those 5 words. And,
Yeah,
it works for them. But
yeah,
me personally, like, I've tried to do that with Spanish, and I find that I only learn them for a short period. If I go
yeah,
out and have a conversation with somebody in a language I'm learning, and they use something new, and then I think about it and I look it up and I have context to it, that whole process makes me remember it, because there's context and it matters to me. But for me, just memorizing 5 words before I go to bed, using them in the morning, doesn't really work. But for other people, it does. So if you find that, like, memorizing vocab builds, it works for you, then I would say do it. But, my question is, just because you've memorized those words, can you use them? Right?
yeah,
If you're actually in a conversation with somebody, will you use those words? Will they come out? Or are they just kind of stuck? Would it be like someone asking you to do an old algebra problem from when you were in junior high? Like, yeah, you learned how to do it. And maybe if you had y equals mx plus b in front of you, you could figure it out.
yeah.
But
So we should use these words. We should read a lot. We should listen a lot. We maybe we should watch movies. Also, we should listen to songs. This things is the best way to continue practicing, to continue learning English.
Yeah, I feel like it's a very, here I go with another like muscle analogy, but it's like a very low impact way of learning, right? Just like if you were to go out and play sports all day, the next day you'd be really sore, right? Well, like if you study too long and too hard, you can kind of make your brain sore too, in that way.
Yeah,
So to me, by constantly having English in your life, so that when you look at your phone, there's English, and when you listen to your favorite podcasts in English, and when you do things that you enjoy, like watch movies in English, like you're learning even when you don't realize you're learning, right? So,
yeah,
like for example, maybe there's some words that are high frequency words, and it takes you literally 30 or 40 times hearing them before you actually really understand it.
yeah,
Well, I think that by that point, by the time you've heard it a few times on your podcast and you've run across it on Reddit and you've heard it in movies, by the time you really get it, you've got it. Like it's there. You don't need to study it. You're never going to forget it. Like you just get it now. You could just grab a dictionary, learn those words, study, study, study. But I feel like if you never use those words and if you don't hear them used in any other context, eventually your brain's just kind of to decide, like, well, I don't need this information anymore,
yeah,
it kind of gets rid of it. But
yeah,
if your brain constantly hears these things, again, maybe you don't even realize you're learning it yet. It's kind of passive learning.
yeah.
But I think that passive learning is good because it doesn't exhaust you. And I feel like it's much more longer lasting.
Yeah. Actually, I read an article yesterday. It was written by a linguistic. He says that if I learn the 800 most frequency words and its inflections, that will account for about 75% of all the English language. And the rest will come by practicing by the time. So we shouldn't worry about every single word.
I think that if your aim or your to understand and be understood, he's absolutely right. You know what I mean? But put yourself in the position where you're trying to speak English with somebody and
Yeah,
you only understand 70% of their words
yeah.
and you can only reply with 70% of the words.
Yeah,
There's going to be a lot of confusion still. You know what I
yeah,
mean? So I think in the end, he's right in that you can communicate, um, but in the process of learning those 800 words, it's not going to hurt to learn some of those other words that come up in between too. You know what I mean?
yeah,
You're going to eventually have to learn them.
yeah,
Um, and like I said before, a lot of learning a language is more than just the words. There
yeah,
are so many phrases and sayings that we use that don't
yeah,
even necessarily have a specific meaning, but they're filler words or they're words we make
yeah,
to pause or just to let someone know we're listening or that we understand. So there's a lot of little subtleties, and I think you do want to pick those up as
yeah.
you go along too.
Yeah, I will try actually. So before we end this session, actually I have a YouTube channel. So do you mind if I post our sessions on my channel?
Yeah, that's fine. You can do that.
Okay, thank you and see you again.
Yeah, I'll see you next time.
See you, see you soon.
All right, good to see you. Bye bye.
Bye, bye, bye.